What's up, guys? This is Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, and the overall market. Just know that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice. So as far as the market's going, we're gapping up this morning, and so far the market's holding up decently in the pre-market. But there's going to be a lot of data coming out very soon, which will cause some volatility. We're going to be watching to see if it causes the market to pump or if it causes a big rug pull. Keep in mind the market does have a lot of gaps below, so we'll be watching this very closely. Right now, the market saw this big gap up during the pre-market, and there is a gap below that's overnight, right? There's going to be a nice gap up when we open, and then on top of that, as I've mentioned before, we have a lot of gaps below. So that basically means that very close to where we are, there's going to be, two more gaps. This will be the third gap. So the question is, can we break out higher? Do we get some kind of rug pull? It all depends on the levels and what kind of reaction we get to the data. So I would recommend just watching that very closely. So what's going on? What is this data? Well, today is Monday, November 3rd, 2025. Keep in mind that at 9:45 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have the S&P Global Manufacturing PMI report. Then at 10 o'clock a.m., we have the ISM Manufacturing PMI Employment New Orders and Prices. So expect some volatility 15 minutes and 30 minutes after the stock market opens, especially at 10 o'clock a.m. Then at 11:30 a.m., we have the 3 and 6 month bill auctions, which could also cause some volatility. But the main time for volatility is going to be 10 o'clock a.m. So watch that very closely to see what that leads to. Now, on top of this, I just want to add on that we had earnings from Berkshire Hathaway. They had good earnings with operating profits being up about 34%. That's great news for them. The share price is up. However, the cash hoard is now up at a record $381.6 billion with no buybacks so far. So that's something that's very interesting and worth mentioning. So far, we're seeing record amounts of cash that's being hoarded. So that is important, at least thus far. And besides, I'm not seeing anything else that's too crazy on the news, nothing too significant. Later on during the week, we have Tesla with their shareholder meeting. And then that's pretty much it for now. But I also want to add on that when it comes to President Trump, he mentioned that next week's case of tariffs is going to be one of the most important in history for the country. And, when he was talking about this, he's referring to what's about to happen with the legal battle. Please remember, everyone, that on Wednesday, the Trump administration is going to be heading to the Supreme Court to face off against small businesses in a group of states that contend most of the tariffs. That is very important. They're basically saying that the tariffs are, illegal. They should be struck down. And this is important news because the Supreme Court is going to be looking into this, and the final decision is going to be coming out likely very soon. So after months of just arguments being made and a lot of different things, the Supreme Court is going to be holding a vote either against or in favor of the tariffs. It's going to have a big effect on policy affecting hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars worth of goods. This is going to be very important. So we're going to see what the Supreme Court rules. So keep that in mind, at least for the markets. So that being said, let's talk about what's happening with these setups. So SPY is trying to push right now in the pre-markets. We're favoring an attempt for that like 685 to 686 area. But the last time we touched 686, we kind of like pumped and then dumped. So are we about to see a double top rejection, or do we continue to run? If we hold above 686, SPY could be going for 688 and then get closer to all-time highs. But if we don't, we could return to fill this gap back down to 682. And also know there's 1, 2, and 3 gaps below. There's 3 gaps below right now that are very close by. And the last time we gapped up like this, we got a rejection. So be careful. So watch that resistance at 686. We're going to see if you hold above it. If not, keep in mind that we have this gap down here down to 682. And if we don't hold above this, we could still turn back down to fill the gap. It all depends on this data. How do the manufacturing numbers look at 10 o'clock a.m.? Do we see strength in that sector or not, which is pivotal for the overall economy? Or do we get some kind of rejection? If there is a rejection, there is this gap to fill, so be very careful. The last time we did touch that resistance, we got a rejection. So we'll see if you reject or not, but for now, I would just be very, very mindful of that. Do we break 686 or not? We might kind of push in, then turn back down, and there is a good chance we come back down to fill the gap, but we'll see just to be safe. On the QQQ, it's a very similar setup. We're testing 635. If we break 636, we're going for all-time highs. If we don't, if we come short, just like what happened on Friday, we kind of like touched that resistance that we rejected. There is a gap to fill back down to 629. So are we about to touch near 635 and then reject, or do we continue to run? We'll see about that just to be safe. So we're at resistance. Will we reject here? It depends on the data. If so, there's a gap back down at 629. On the IWM, we're showing some weakness. We're making lower highs. Unless we get back above 246, we're favoring a move back down to 244. On ES, we're looking decent. We're going to see if 6,900 holds or not. If we could break 6,900, there's a chance we push for 6,920. If we lose that and we don't hold it, though, we could return to 68.65. So we're going to have to see how it goes. Do we push here and turn back down? Do we keep going? We're technically in our range, but be careful in case we reject. So watch that very closely. On NQ, we have resistance at 26,250, and we have support at 26,095 flat. We're kind of like in the middle. So we're going to see if this turns back down, especially as we have a gap down here. So it's going to gap up, but be careful in case we turn. We're going to see if 26,250 holds or not. If it doesn't, we could return to the lower 26,000s. On Bitcoin, we're bouncing. We have a double bottom right here, so we could be looking for an attempt for 109,000. We'll see if we turn. Tesla, as you could tell, it's just it's making higher lows over and over and over again. But notice that there's been negative news involving the European sales, and then there is the possibility of a head and shoulders. But whether this is more bearish or not depends. I do see us testing 452 to 447, and then we're going to see if we bounce off that, if we bounce off this white trend line or not. If we don't bounce off the trend line, we're looking for a head and shoulders to come back down to fill this gap. So watch that very closely, and we'll see what happens at least as time goes on. On Nvda, we have resistance right here around 208,000. We have support down here around 201,000. We're in this range right here, but there is a risk of us turning back down to fill the gap at 202. So we'll have to see what happens. So we're stuck in the middle. We're going to see if Nvidia rejects here and gets back down to 202 or not. Break 210, we're bullish, but if we reject near this level, we could still turn back down to 202. So watch that very closely. Appl has support at 269 and 265, so we could be declining to those levels before it tries to bounce. Palantir is on an uptrend. We do have support down here at 201. We'll see if we bounce. It is technically looking a bit more bullish, though, so we're favoring 207 plus. AMD is kind of flat here. We're going to see if we end up losing support at 256 or not. If we do, we could be dipping more. We're making lower highs here, so watch that very closely. Coinbase is making lower highs here. We're stuck between 345 and 339. We're going to see if this holds. If not, we could be dipping more. Amazon's looking a bit more bullish, favoring 260. Meta is technically on a bit of a downtrend, but it's trying to base at 560, which is a good sign. As long as that holds, as long as 650 holds, we're looking for a bounce back up to about 665. Google could retest 278, and we'll see if we bounce. Then Microsoft is range bound, could be dipping to 515. We'll see if it holds. If not, might be declining to 510. So I do see some weakness in Microsoft this morning. The VIX is declining a bit, but then we're going to be watching to see if this could bounce again because of the possibility of an inverse head and shoulders, and also because the VIX is forming an accumulation. That could also favor a bounce soon. So we're going to see how well the market holds up. We're at resistance, so be careful on SPY, and we're going to see if we get a rejection here to come back down to fill this gap on SPY and the QQQ. They have very similar setups. There are gaps below to fill overnight, but we'll see just to be safe. It depends on this data, what kind of reaction we get. So look for some volatility at 10 o'clock a.m. And just know that there is still that risk of us coming back down based off what happened last week. Last week, we gapped up and rejected at these levels. So are we going to gap up and reject again? We'll see what kind of reaction we get at 10 o'clock a.m. Thank you all so much for listening. Make sure you watch your data, and peace out.